I bet you clicked on this video because you want to know what the best options are for the Great League in Pokemon Go. Well, you're in luck. This video covers just that. So this is a pretty simple infographic I made to cover what the best general picks are for the Great League in Pokemon Go. It's called the Great League Simplified. And the picks from this are used with the help of the Go Battle Sim on Game Press, and also some simulations from PokeBattler. So when people think about Pokemon Go battle meta, they see it as a battle of rock, paper, scissors. Well, I'm here to inform you that it's more like paper, scissors, rock, lizard, Spock. It's not one thing beats another thing that beats another thing that beats another thing. There's some more dynamic interactions going on here. And I tried to capture that with the Great League in this nice little this beats that pentagram here. Now there are some Pokemon that don't precisely fit this mold very well, but are also quite good for the Great League meta, so I have these mold breakers sectioned over here. Now of course these 8 Pokemon aren't the only Pokemon you can use in the Great League. That would be ridiculous, so I do have other Pokemon options for each type that's being described here for all these different types of Pokemon. The basic premise though is, if you have a flying type Pokemon and you want to be able to counter it, well, you have more than just one option in order to do that. And if your opponent has, a flying type Pokemon and a grass type Pokemon, there are Pokemon out there that can dominate both types. So I'm just going to go through these Pokemon type by type with you, give you some indications for their usage, and let you make your own conclusions for how you want to use them on your team. Starting out, we have the flying type Pokemon, represented by Altaria, because Altaria is the most powerful flying type Pokemon in the Great League. In fact, Altaria may as well be one of the most powerful Pokemon in the Great League overall. What makes Altaria so ridiculous is that it has that fast move Dragon Breath, which is disproportionately more powerful than many other fast moves in PvP in Pokemon Go. It also has Sky Attack, which is a very powerful charge attack. So Altaria, very busted option in general and very accessible for players because, you got Frenzy Plant Meganium here, we got freaking Melmetal. Not everybody can get their hands on these exclusive Pokemon, but Altaria, I think everybody has the chance to get an Altaria. So very good Pokemon to have on your team. But there are other flying types that you can consider to use on your team other than Altaria. One good option that I'm currently employing is Skarmory. Skarmory is great because it's a steel type Pokemon and a flying type Pokemon. So it can do the same job that Altaria does in beating grass type and ground type Pokemon by resisting their attacks and hitting them with the powerful Sky Attack, but it also has the steel type resistances, which allows it to overcome psychic type Pokemon such as Cresselia and other flying type Pokemon such as Altaria. So that is something good to keep in mind if you want to whip out the Skarmory, be a little bit different. We have grass type Pokemon. And the best grass type Pokemon for PvP by far are going to be Meganium and Venusaur. And the reason why is because Vine Whip, much like Dragon Breath, is disproportionately more powerful than other fast moves in PvP. It has really high energy aggregation and it does more damage than other high energy gaining moves have. On top of that, they have Frenzy Plant, and Frenzy Plant is just an almighty, all-powerful grass type attack that synergizes really well with the Vine Whip, which Meganium and Venusaur both have Vine Whip, and Frenzy Plant if you got the Community Day versions. Meganium and Venusaur are so powerful that if your opponent doesn't have a check or a counter to it, they can basically steamroll the entire team effortlessly. So it's always good to keep your grass type counters in mind. Perhaps you might want to use a Altaria or a Skarmory to beat them down. Now beyond their almighty grass type attacks, they also have some extra coverage moves. Meganium has Earthquake, so any steel type Pokemon or fire type Pokemon that thought they were cheeky, thinking they might get an advantage on the Meganium, are going to have to be a little bit wary because Meganium's carrying that extra threat of the Earthquake attack. Venusaur, on the other end of the spectrum, has Sludge Bomb, and while Sludge Bomb doesn't help it out too much against its greatest counters, it can help Venusaur beat down other grass type Pokemon. Maybe that Venusaur will beat down a Meganium. Who knows? Now there are grass type Pokemon that function well outside of these two. One good option is Sceptile. Now Sceptile on paper looks like it would be an objectively worse Meganium. I mean, it doesn't have Vine Whip and it doesn't have Frenzy Plant, so that really sucks for Sceptile. But what Sceptile does have is Fury Cutter, which gives it some unique coverage, gives it a little bug type damage, which can help it out in mirror matchups against grass type Pokemon and help it out against these psychic and dark type Pokemon. A little bit more, every little bit helps. And then it also has Leaf Blade, and Leaf Blade has a lower energy cost than Frenzy Plant does, which means you could launch your Leaf Blade sooner than another grass type would be able to launch a Frenzy Plant, which could help Sceptile in some specific matchups. On top of that, Sceptile also has the Earthquake, so it does have that Earthquake threat that Meganium has going on. So overall, Sceptile, pretty good Pokemon. The biggest thing that holds it back is its low bulk. Now, if you're curious about how stats and CP work in the leagues, I do have a video linked in the description that covers that in more detail. The TLDR, though, is that CP favors the attack stat. So when you have a CP cap, Pokemon that have a higher attack stat than they have HP or defense basically have lower stats than competing Pokemon that have a lower attack stat than them, because the attack stat overinflates their CP. So when you put the cap on, it makes them a little bit more fragile than their friends. So yeah, Sceptile is one such Pokemon that is kind of hurt by this. So overall, I'd say for the Great League, the two greatest threats, pun intended, is Altaria and Meganium. They're just ultra powerful. So if you are trying to prepare yourself for Great League battles, it'd be good to have some Pokemon on your side that can handle both of these threats at once. So going through most of the numbers, run a bunch of simulation data, no Pokemon was able to take on both of these two Pokemon as consistently as Melmetal was. So Melmetal, you have to get to Fuchsia City in Pokemon Let's Go. Maybe you got a friend or somebody in your community that has the Pokemon Let's Go games, and they'll let you transfer a Pokemon to their game so you can get the special Melmetal box. Whatever you can do to start getting your Meltans, to evolve the Melmetal, I say get on that, because really powerful Pokemon right here, able to tango with two of the best, most powerful Pokemon in the Great League meta. Of course, you don't need Melmetal to do that. There are other types of Pokemon that can take the flying and the grass types on. For example, you have Skarmory, another steel type Pokemon that can do that job pretty well. Magnemite and Magneton with the legacy moves on the Magneton could also do Melmetal's job reasonably well. So those are some Pokemon to keep your eyes out for. Another good steel type Pokemon is Steelix. Steelix kind of loses any chance it has at beating grass type Pokemon, so don't even think about that. But Steelix absolutely dominates flying type Pokemon not named Charizard. So Steelix, really good option. And Steelix also has the added benefit of just completely shutting down other steel type Pokemon and electric type Pokemon. So Steelix is definitely a very worthy option to use as a steel type in the Great League. So the electric type Pokemon have the infamous Thundershock Thunderbolt combo going on. Many of the members use Spark, some of them use Discharge or Thunder Punch instead of Thundershock, but the base idea remains the same. Thundershock and Spark, really high energy gaining attacks. Thunder Punch and Thunderbolt, and also Discharge, very low energy cost moves. The idea is that you're launching these charge moves faster than your opponent can, and I'd say in the Great League, more so than the Ultra and Master League, having that charge move advantage is huge for success, because the Pokemon down here are a bit more frail than Pokemon up there. So busting out these heavy powered charge moves faster than your opponent can bust out their charge moves definitely sounds like a key route to success there. Unless, of course, your opponent resists your attack, which the grass types and the ground types do. So rip the electric types, right? So I have the electric types here represented by Lantern, because I feel like Lantern overall is the best electric type Pokemon for the Great League meta. Reason being is because it has Water Gun and Hydro Pump. So if you end up having to face a ground type Pokemon, let's say Steelix, then you're not completely lost in that fight. Where if you use an electric type Pokemon that's just using pure electric type attacks, some of them have normal type coverage, that's not going to help them out too much. Then you are just completely shut down and walled by ground and grass type Pokemon and other electric type Pokemon in a really huge way, which could just spell out your doom, and it just feels bad when you're in that situation, let me tell you. Yeah, so overall I feel like Lantern is the best user of this electric type combo. I mean, of course we have Melmetal, but Melmetal's in a league of its own, right? Yeah. So really powerful Pokemon there. Definitely worth considering, because if your opponent doesn't have a grass type or a ground type Pokemon, or maybe you already neutralized these threats, perhaps you neutralized them with your flying type Pokemon, well then these electric type Pokemon can cut through your opponent's team like a knife through hot butter. Maybe it's an electric powered heat knife. Okay, I tried. Now, another similar combo to this lies in the ground-type Pokemon with Mudshot and Mud Bomb. In fact, I didn't really think about Wishcash or Marshtomp being good PvP Pokemon until I saw results from PokeBattler. So definitely check out PokeBattler's ranking page for PvP, can give you some pretty good ideas for which Pokemon are good in PvP. But yeah, seeing Whiscash popped up got my brain thinking, well, just how good is Whiscash? And I started running simulations on it, and I was like, yeah, Mudshot, Mud Bomb. That's like the same thing as Thundershock, Thunderbolt, except ground type. So obviously, really good idea there. These ground types shut down the electric types pretty well. Definitely shut down the steel type Pokemon. Struggle against the flying and the grass type Pokemon, which is definitely to their detriment. But in more neutral matchups, they are getting that charge move advantage, which is huge for them. Now, as far as the Mudshot users, which ones are the best, which ones do you want to use? I'd say Whiscash is definitely one of the best. Second best would probably be Flygon. Now, what makes Whiscash great is that it carries that Blizzard attack. So if it's the end of the battle or close to the end, your opponent doesn't have any shields, and you're bringing yourself to that Blizzard faster than they can bring themselves to that final Frenzy Plant. Like, let's say you've got a shield advantage or an energy advantage, right? I mean, Frenzy Plant's going to come before Blizzard. You get to that Blizzard, and they can't shield it, well, that could spell out victory for your Whiscash. When it comes to Flygon, Flygon has the benefit of being a Dragon-type Pokemon, so it takes neutral hits from the grass types, and it also has the benefit of having Dragon Claw instead of Mud Bomb, which has better neutral coverage and synergizes really well with Mudshot. The synergy between ground and Dragon-type coverage definitely cannot be understated. So yeah, really powerful Pokemon there. You can whip out Dragon Claws and blind your opponent, and Flygon is one such Pokemon that can overcome flying type Pokemon with its rapid Dragon Claw damage, circumstances allowing. So that basically covers the general gist of what's going on here. Now you might be thinking, Mr. Swag, you could just simplify this even further, pull the steel type Pokemon down, merge them with the electric types, and then put ice type Pokemon here. But ice types have one big problem, and that is Frenzy Plant. So the best ice-type Pokemon end up being Lapras, Blastoise, Azumarill, and Alolan Ninetales. Now I know that not every single one of those Pokemon is an ice-type Pokemon, but they're functioning as an ice-type Pokemon in the fact that they want to use Ice Beam to beat down flying-type Pokemon and hopefully grass-type Pokemon. But all four of those Pokemon have a shared problem, and that is that they cannot tolerate Frenzy Plant hits. I mean, obviously the water types are going to be going down to Frenzy Plant, but even Alolan Ninetales, because of its lack of bulk, is going down quite handedly to the Frenzy Plant, which is unfortunate. If you want to use Ice type to function to beat both of these guys, you might want to look at Articuno. But Articuno is functioning more as a flying type Pokemon than it is a Ice type Pokemon. Sort of like how Skarmory, even though it's a Steel type, is still doing the flying type job for this wheel here, if you will. So that's the big problem that they have. But these Ice-type Pokemon are still definitely worth considering. If they do get the charge move advantage over the Grass-type Pokemon, all it takes is one solid Ice-type punch, and these guys are going down. And then on top of that, there are a lot of neutral matchups that these Pokemon can bulk and power their way through. So definitely worth considering using any of these Ice-type or pseudo-Ice-type Pokemon on your team. Definitely do not want to leave them out, especially Azumarill. Azumarill is pretty crazy. Now another such Pokemon that is really bulky, functions really well in a lot of matchups, but doesn't dominate in a very explicit way, is Cresselia. If you're wondering how to get a Cresselia into the Great League, you have to trade. You have to trade and roll low IVs, and that's how you get it under the 1500 benchmark and sneak it into the Great League there. So get your once per day trades on with some friends that you know that have a Cresselia. Now what makes Cresselia really great for the Great League is that it is really bulky, it's got Psycho Cut, and it's got powerful charge moves. Psycho Cut brings you to your charge moves faster than other Pokemon would, and your bulk allows you to tank more hits and out-bulk your opponents, which is pretty important. The problem that Cresselia runs into is the same problem that the water/ice types kind of run into, and that is it's a little bit too slow on the draw with its charge move. In a lot of neutral matchups where you'd think, okay, I've got more bulk, I should be able to win, Cresselia does end up going down because your opponent is able to get off a charge move sooner than it can. So that could spell the end for Cresselia. But that spelling the end for Cresselia isn't always certain. It always comes down to what the matchup is precisely. So because Cresselia is so ambiguous in this regard, I have it set off to the side here as a mold breaker. And finally, we are now brought to the trickiest Pokemon in the Great League meta, which is the Fighting type Pokemon. Now what makes the Fighting type Pokemon so unique is that they have that counterattack. Counter functions a lot like Dragon Breath does, where it's a high damaging move that has higher energy gains than other attacks that have its same base power. So it's just a disproportionately powerful attack. So that works out really well for fighting type Pokemon in the meta. Now what makes fighting types so difficult to classify or place on a simple wheel like this is the fact that the secondary typing that they have really influences what they're good at. The secondary typing and what their second charge move is. For example, you have Breloom. Breloom has Seed Bomb, which is a low energy cost grass type charge move. It also has the grass typing. So that allows Breloom to handle ground type and electric type Pokemon better than other fighting types would be able to, which works in its favor. On the other end of the spectrum, you have Sudowoodo. Not a fighting type Pokemon, but it does have counter, so it's a fighting type Pokemon, right? It definitely has a disadvantage to the ground type and the grass type Pokemon, unlike Breloom, but unlike Breloom, it can actually handle the flying type Pokemon really well because it's got the rock slide damage and the rock typing. So things definitely aren't 100% explicit with the fighting type Pokemon. Another unique thing that's going on with the fighting type Pokemon is they function really well with what I'm calling the fake out strategy. Basically, many of them carry Dynamic Punch. Best example, let's say Medicham, right? So if you're having Medicham fight a Melmetal, Melmetal is going to have the energy advantage over you. While it's doing neutral damage and you're doing super effective damage, the fact that it can belt out these Thunderbolts faster than you can belt out your Dynamic Punches suggests that in some matchups it will be able to beat you before you can beat it. One way that you could gain an advantage over the Melmetal in this matchup is to use your Ice Punch. Use the Ice Punch when you have enough energy to use the Dynamic Punch, and the Melmetal may anticipate that being the Dynamic Punch, which would cause them to use a shield. So they'd shield your weak attack that doesn't matter to them. They're like, oh wow, that was an Ice Punch, I could have tanked that, right? But then you're that much closer than you would be had you used Dynamic Punch to your next Dynamic Punch, and being that much closer to your next Dynamic Punch could put you ahead in the matchup. So when it comes to the fighting types, you could probably think of them as being a more skill-based Pokemon that could work out in your favor. Now, if you're up against a skilled opponent and they know that you can fake them out with that, well then maybe they might call your bluff. Now Melmetal's like, yeah, I'm not putting up a shield, and then you punch him with Ice Punch, and Melmetal's like, yeah, you fool, Thunderbolt, right? Does not care about your Ice Punch. But then if you know that they know that you know that you could do that, maybe you just went with Dynamic Punch anyways. And they're like, yeah, Ice Punch, I know what you're up to, fool. And then they get punched with the Dynamic Punch. Big old knockout there, right? And then they feel like an idiot for calling your bluff that wasn't a bluff. They called the bluff improperly, right? So yeah, fighting types, really unique Pokemon there. So that is basically the simplification of the Great League. I'll have a link to this image in the description if you want to be able to reference it. Now, I want to reiterate again that this simplification of the Great League isn't set in stone. There are a lot of Pokemon that function really well, and a lot of Pokemon that can, reverse the wheel, if you will. And then you've got these mold breakers over here making a simplification of the Great League that much more complicated. So definitely bring in your own research when making your teams, and trust your instincts. Don't take everything some YouTube guy tells you for fact. Now, as far as being able to do your own Great League research, I do have a video coming out tomorrow on how to use the Battle Matrix tool on Go Battle Sim. So a step-by-step guide on how to use that to figure out what the best Pokemon are for you in various matchups. It's basically the same technique that was used to develop all this kind of information and makes it a little bit more explicit for you. You know what they say, man? You feed a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach a man to fish, and then he stops watching your YouTube channel. So that's all I've got for the Great League meta. If there's some ultimate Pokemon that I didn't talk about here that you feel we should know about, comment below, let us know what's up. Or maybe keep it to yourself. It's your secret weapon. Ryan Swag hasn't sniffed it out yet. Maybe keep that information from the world. Up to you. And if you got any questions on this content that you want answered, well, definitely comment below, let me know what's up, and I'll see if I can help you out. And if you like this content, you want to see more like it, maybe you want to see what the Swagman has to say about the Ultra and the Master League, or maybe you want to catch a whiff of that Battle Matrix guide, well then make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. SwagTips. I bet you clicked on this video because you want to know which Pokemon are good for the Great League in Pokemon Go. Well, my name's Ryan Swag, and today you can call me Coach. That's such a weird opening. Alright.